A multiple listing service, or an MLS, is a database of properties shared among brokers that have agreed to cooperate and compensate each other. To this day, an MLS remains the greatest real estate marketing vehicle ever created. From the very first MLS, back more than 100 years ago, the concept was simple, that the cooperative database of properties was to be shared and had rules around that to ensure the accuracy and completeness of that database and to further facilitate the cooperation among brokers. So what does that mean in today's world? Well, real estate is complicated, and MLS makes it simpler. Think about it. Without a shared database, without rules for completeness of that data, without the unilateral offer of cooperation and compensation, real estate would be much more complicated. The inherent nature of the MLS takes care of all of that so that brokers and agents can focus on what's needed. In today's world, many think of MLS as a software, but the software is really just the tool of the MLS, the way to access that database. Reality is the MLS is that shared database with those rules that govern that database. Over time, more products, features, and rules have been added, but all with the same mission. Does this facilitate more cooperation among the brokers in the marketplace? Because after all, that's the ultimate goal of what an MLS does and how it makes the market work.
How the MLS makes the market work. In this video, you will learn about rules and best practices, top violations, do's and don'ts, and additional policies and important information to know. Section 1. MLS rules and best practices. Membership types. Before we get into MLS rules and best practices, it is important to understand that the Cape Cod and Islands Association of Realtors and the Cape Cod and Islands Multiple Listing Service are two separate companies with separate memberships, bylaws, and policies. Participants and subscribers. A participant is the realtor member principal of a firm, partnership, corporation, or branch office manager designated by such as the responsible party for the MLS and shall have all rights, benefits, and privileges of the CCI MLS and shall accept all obligations to the CCI MLS for compliance with the bylaws and rules and regulations by all persons affiliated with the participant. Often, participants are referred to as designated realtor or DR. Licensed agents hanging their license with a brokerage and whom belong to CCI MLS are called subscribers. This means that the participant is responsible for the listings entered into the MLS system. Therefore, the issuance of fines falls on the participant. You will learn more about the MLS citation policy shortly. Mandatory listing area. The mandatory listing area of the Cape Cod and Islands Multiple Listing Service is Barnstable County, Dukes County, Nantucket County, and the town of Wareham. 48-hour rule and clear cooperation. Once you have a fully executed exclusive listing agreement for a residential, land, or multifamily property type within our mandatory listing area, it must be submitted to the MLS office within 48 hours. This includes office exclusive and delayed listings. For delayed listings, agents may simply upload their documentation to an incomplete listing or send it directly to the MLS office as you would for an office exclusive listing. All properties entered into CCI MLS, regardless of the property type, are subject to its rules and regulations. For example, if you enter a commercial property into the MLS, it is subject to the rules and regulations, including the documentation and listing submission to the MLS within 48 hours. The clear cooperation policy reads as follows. Within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, including IDX and BOW, digital communications marketing, email blasts, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, and applications available to the general public. Office exclusives are still allowed, but may not be publicly marketed. Per NAR, implementation is required by May 1st, 2020. More information about the Clear Cooperation Policy may be found in the updated MLS rules and regulations on our website once available. Complete and accurate data. Listing agreements and input form shall be complete in every detail. This includes, but is not limited to, photo, address, price, compensation, additional terms and disclosures, any required field, status changes. Status changes of the following types shall be made in the MLS with the appropriate paperwork attached within 24 hours of written authorization. Temp off market or withdrawn, extensions, and cancellation. Written authorization is required, and it is against the law to change a listing without it. Cancellations may be made by office brokers and full rights office managers only. You will learn more about status definitions shortly. Signs. Only the for sale sign of the listing broker may be placed on the property. Prior to closing, only the sold sign of the listing broker may be placed on a property, unless the listing broker, with permission of the seller, authorizes the cooperating broker to post such a sign. All signage of the listing broker shall be removed at the closing of the sale unless consent is given by the buyer. Use of the term MLS. No member shall insinuate that they operate an MLS or that the public has direct access to it. This includes, but is not limited to, the following: firm name, URLs, email addresses, and website addresses. Compensation. Compensation must be offered and must be entered as a definitive dollar amount or percentage. Such offers shall be unconditional, except that entitlement to compensation is determined by the cooperating broker's procuring cause of the sale or lease. As an example, in the MLS, agents may not condition compensation on whether a buyer representative is present at showings or not. All offers of compensation are negotiable. If you have questions on how to negotiate compensation, please speak with your broker. IDX and VOW. IDX stands for Internet Data Exchange, sharing listings with each other for online display. VOW stands for Virtual Office Website, a website that provides brokerage services to consumers with whom they have established a broker-consumer relationship without a brick and mortar. Agents may, with the consent of their client, opt out of display to these sites on a listing-by-listing basis. Broker distribution. It's important to understand your brokerage policies around data distribution. Some brokerages have their own agreements with various publishers. Find out if your brokerage distributes directly or not. All publishers display the source of their data. CCI MLS distributes to the following websites: Realtor.com, Homes.com, Boston.com, Cape Cod Media Group, and ListHub. Brokers have the option to opt out of data distribution on a blanket basis for their offices. Agents may do so on a listing-by-listing basis. Section 2. Top violations and how to avoid them. Failure to upload proper documentation. Be sure to withdraw, extend, or cancel listings within 24 hours of written authorization. Do not make any changes in the MLS without prior written authorization. And as a best practice, upload written authorization at the time of the change in the MLS. Misuse of public remarks. Include information about the description and condition of the property. Never add contact information, open houses, websites, occupancy, or branding. And keep it simple. Describe the property. That's it. Failure to close a listing within 72 hours. Always update listings within 72 hours of closing. Never keep a listing pending in the MLS after it closes. This affects the MLS data as well as statistics. As a best practice, update the estimated selling date in the MLS if your property will not be closing on the original date expected. Uploading branded photos or videos. Upload photos and, if requested, videos or virtual tours to your listings. Do not upload photos, videos, or virtual tours with your name, office name, phone number, email address, or website information within. If you have concerns on whether or not your media includes branding, contact the MLS office. Password sharing. Always keep your passwords private. Never allow anyone, including admins, to use your password to log into the MLS. And as a best practice, have anyone working with or for you contact the membership office to obtain their own credentials. Admins and those on a team will always log into the member dashboard using their U number. However, you can then work as your team or another agent, which is called super using, once in Flex MLS. Contact MLS support at cciaor.com if you have questions on how to superuse or if you've forgotten your password. Section 3. Additional policies and important information to know. Listing statuses. Before I begin discussing the current listing statuses, it is important to know that some of the information discussed may change after implementation of the Clear Cooperation Policy. Active. Property is in the MLS being marketed and shown. This should be added within 48 hours. Contingent showings allowed. A subset of active, property has a fully executed offer, but the member and client will continue to market and show the property due to a contingency which has not been met. Listings should be updated within 24 hours. Days on market will continue to calculate and listings in this status will expire. Contingent no showings. A subset of pending, property has a fully executed offer with a contingency, but the member and client will no longer show the property. This should be updated in the MLS within 24 hours. Days on market will stop calculating and the listing will not expire. Pending, property has a fully executed offer with no viable contingency and is no longer being shown. Listings should be updated in the MLS within 24 hours. Please note, properties do not need to be in a contingent status prior to being pending. Temp off market. Property is being taken off the market temporarily, but a valid listing agreement still exists. This should be updated in the MLS within 24 hours. Listings will automatically expire on the entered expiration date. Canceled. Property is being removed from the market due to the listing agreement ending prior to the original expiration date. These should be updated in the MLS within 24 hours. Expired. Property has reached its contract expiration. Closed. Property has had its closing. This should be updated in the MLS within 72 hours. Team policy. A team is defined as 2 or more CCI MLS participants or subscribers working or acting as one for all transactions. Things to know. No statistical history will be transferred if you leave a team or it dissolves. You may only be on one team at a time. Team members may access the MLS at the same time. You may choose to use your U number or T number for maintaining contacts. The T number assigned will replace your U number for the purpose of submitting new listings and closing listings. Your U number will be used to register for classes, events, pay a bill, or log into the member dashboard. As a best practice, if you choose to add one of your team members as a co-listing agent, be sure to remove them prior to closing the listing. A team member should never be added as a co-selling agent. In addition, it's important to note that the state does not consider teams a licensed entity. Photo policy. All listings must have at least one photo prior to being active in the MLS. Things to know. The first photo entered shall be the primary listing photo, which can be updated upon the additional photo entry. Up to 100 photos may be entered. Properties will be required to have one exterior front-facing photo, which does not need to be the primary. Under construction to be built. Photos must be clearly marked as such on both the proposed photo sketch submitted and in the remarks of the listing. A detailed sketch or rendering is acceptable and should clearly state that it is proposed. Photos taken from the actual land or a proposed floor plan marked as such are also acceptable. Condominium. A photo of the sign in front of the development or a photo of the entire complex and/or unit is required, whichever is most applicable. Land. A photo or sketch of the property is acceptable. Best practices. First, familiarize yourself with state and federal copyright law. Never use photographs of another participant or subscriber, or anyone else, without prior written permission. This includes the sharing of listings on social media sites. Comparable sale policy. A comparable sale is defined as a listing that is entered into the CCI MLS listing software that has not been marketed by use of the listing software. Comparable sales of the following types may be entered into the MLS using the comparable sale property type. MLS withheld listings. These are listings taken on an exclusive listing agreement, whereas the seller has directed the listing agent to withhold the property from the CCI MLS. These listings may be entered by the listing agent with the seller's written consent, or in the case where a member represented a buyer in the sale of a property where there was no exclusive seller agreement signed. They may enter the listing as a comparable sale with the written consent of the buyer. Sold before entered into MLS. The only type of comparable sale that will be allowed into CCI MLS is a regular listing and not by use of the comparable sale property type. These listings should have an exclusive listing agreement that has dictated the listing agent to market the property in CCI MLS. These listings may be entered into the MLS by the listing agent, given the exclusive listing agreement originally stated that the property was to be marketed in the MLS, or the seller has provided written consent. Other MLS transactions. A property listed by an agent in an other MLS, but whereas a member of CCI MLS represented the buyer in the transaction. These may be entered by the buyer representative with written consent from the listing agent and seller of the property. FSBOs. For sale by owner properties that had a member of CCI MLS represent the buyer in the transaction. These may be entered by the buyer representative with the seller or buyer's written consent. Things to know. Comparable sale listings may be added within 1 calendar year of the closing. Properties with an exclusive agreement prior to receiving an offer may be entered into the MLS as a regular listing. Agents that have an expired property in the MLS may have staff update the listing to pending or closed within 1 year of expiration, given they can provide a copy of the signed offer or P&S and the property has not been marketed by any other agent. After 1 year, these properties may be entered as a comparable sale with the written consent of the seller. If the property expires due to the incorrect use of statuses, the appropriate steps will be taken as outlined in the MLS citation policy. A CCI MLS participant or subscriber must have been the listing agent or buyer representative for the comparable sale to be entered. Agents must pen a listing with the appropriate pending date prior to marking it closed. Only listings in the mandatory listing area are accepted as a comparable sale. Only listings of the following property types may be entered as a comparable sale: residential, multifamily, land, and commercial. Comparable sales must follow the CCI MLS photo policy. A listing agreement or seller consent form must be attached to comparable sales. Comparable sales must have a list date. Comparable sales must have an expiration date. When entering one of the first 3 comparable sale types, you should use the original expiration date agreed upon. FSBOs should use the closing date as the expiration date. Best practice: never try to enter a comparable sale without the consent of the buyer or seller. If the MLS rules and regulations have not been followed, the appropriate steps shall be taken as outlined in the MLS citation policy. Citation policy. The purpose of the citation policy is to ensure the integrity of the MLS, including the currency and accuracy of its information. Issuance of citations. Step 1. It's a warning. Everyone gets one per violation type in a rolling 12-month period. If the violation is not corrected in 24 hours, you may receive an instant fine. Step 2. Uncorrected violation. As a violation goes uncorrected, the fine keeps adding up to $15,000 to be exact. Step 3. Fines. Fines are due within 1 month of issuance, but we will remind you 10 days prior to the due date. Step 4. Failure to pay. Mandatory education must be taken by the violator, and suspension of MLS privileges may result. Step 5. Oops, I did it again. After the first offense of the same violation, an instant fine and mandatory education is to be done within 2 weeks. Sorry, no second warning. Step 6. Failure to pay or learn. Lose MLS access until the fine is paid, violation is corrected, and education is completed. Step 7. Additional offenses of the same violation. There is a $250 increase in fine with loss of MLS access until the fine has been paid and the violation corrected. You may request a hearing if you think a violation or fine was issued in error. For a copy of the MLS citation policy, please visit the MLS Forums and Resources section of our website, www.cciaor.com. Thank you. For additional questions, contact MLS support at cciaor.com.